"Human, why do you have a mini Shai Hulud between your legs?" said the alien landlady. Reed Holden stepped out of his rented hover car, squinting against the twin suns of Phalanx 5. He grabbed his duffel bag from the back seat and approached the towering crystalline structure that would be his new home. Renting an apartment sight unseen was risky, but the price had been unbeatable. "Unit 731, he muttered, scanning the alien directory. The elevator whisked him to the 7th floor, where he found himself facing an iridescent door. He pressed the intercom button. The door slid open, revealing a stunning humanoid woman with emerald skin, amethyst eyes, and hair the color of seafoam. She wore a shimmering tunic that accentuated her lithe figure. "Ah, you must be the new tenant," she said, her voice melodic. "I am Kixala, your landlady. Please, come in." Reed stepped inside, marveling at the airy, light-filled space. Prismatic furniture dotted the living area, and strange, fragrant plants lined the walls. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Kixala. I'm Reed Holden." He extended a hand. Kixala tilted her head quizzically at the gesture before grasping his hand in both of hers. Her skin was cool and smooth. "Welcome, Reed Holden. Your quarters are this way." She led him down a short hallway, the material of her dress swishing mesmerizingly. Reed found it hard not to stare. Kixala opened a door, ushering him into a bedroom with a panoramic window overlooking the alien city. "I trust you'll find everything to your liking," Kixala said. "The sanitation chamber is through there." She pointed to another door. "I'll leave you to get settled." "Thanks," Reed said as she glided out. He tossed his bag on the bed and headed straight for the sanitation chamber, eager to wash off the grime of interstellar travel. The bathroom was a marvel of efficiency. Sink, toilet, and open shower all flowing seamlessly together. Reed quickly stripped off his clothes and stepped under the warm spray, groaning in relief as it soothed his aching muscles. He was just lathering shampoo into his dark hair when the bathroom door suddenly opened. Kixala stood there, eyes wide as she took in his naked, soapy form. "Stars above!" she exclaimed. "Human male, why do you have a mini Shai Hulud between your legs?" Reed yelped, hands flying to cover himself. "What the hell? Don't you knock?" Kixala seemed unfazed by his outburst or nudity. She peered curiously at his groin. "Is that normal for your species?" "It looks like a juvenile sandworm, coiled and ready to strike." Reed felt his face flush scarlet. "It's called a penis, and yes, it's a normal part of human male anatomy," he bit out through gritted teeth. "Now, can I please have some privacy?" "Privacy? Oh," Kixala blinked, comprehension dawning. "My apologies, I forgot that humans have peculiar taboos about bodily functions. I merely wish to inform you that dinner will be served in half a rotation." With that, she turned and left, leaving Reed gaping after her. He finished his shower in record time, unnerved and half aroused by the bizarre encounter. He dressed quickly in fresh clothes and ventured out to find Kixala setting dishes on a low table in the living area. The spread looked both foreign and mouth-watering. Reed Holden, please join me," Kixala said, patting the cushion beside her. "I hope you're hungry." "Famished," he admitted, folding himself onto the plush surface. "And please call me Reed." As they ate, Reed found himself studying his hostess. Up close, he could see the faint pattern of scales dusting her high cheekbones and slender neck. Her movements were graceful, almost serpentine. "I must admit, I'm curious about what you said earlier," Kixala said, sipping a fizzy purple drink. "About your anatomical feature? You called it a penis?" Reed nearly choked on a bite of food. He took a long swallow of his own drink before answering. Yeah, the penis is a reproductive organ. It's how human males contribute genetic material to create offspring." "Fascinating," Kixala purred, leaning closer. "And this is achieved through some sort of coupling, I presume?" Reed felt sweat prickle along his hairline. "Yes, it's inserted into the female." "Inserted?" Kixala's eyes sparkled with intrigue. "Your mating practices sound quite different from my own species. Philoxians reproduce through a sacred dance beneath the 7 moons, you see. The resulting energy merges our life forces to create new beings." "Wow, that's beautiful," Reed said, "and much less messy," he added silently. "Indeed," Kixala smiled, revealing pointed ivory teeth. "Perhaps you could enlighten me further about human reproduction sometime. And I find myself intrigued." Was it Reed's imagination, or did her voice dip into a suggestive purr? He shifted uncomfortably, all too aware of her proximity and the growing tightness in his pants. Sure, I guess I could do that, he managed, but maybe not over dinner. Kixala laughed, a sound like wind chimes. Of course, forgive me. I forget myself. It's just been so long since I entertained a guest, especially one as exotic as yourself. They finished the meal with less charged conversation, discussing Reed's work as a xenobiologist and Kixala's role as landlady and cultural liaison. By the time he retired to his room, Reed's head was spinning with new information and the lingering image of Kixala's mesmeric eyes. Over the next few days, Reed settled into a routine, exploring the alien city, collecting samples, and having lively conversations with Kixala over meals. She was endlessly fascinated by Earth culture and biology, often steering their talks into blush-inducing territory. So you're saying the movies often depict mating for entertainment? Kixala asked one evening, her eyes wide. How scandalous. Well, not all movies, Reed amended, just certain genres. Most focus on things like action, comedy, or romance without the explicit stuff. Romance? Kixala tilted her head. Is that not just a precursor to mating? Reed rubbed the back of his neck. It can lead there, sure. But romance is more about the emotional connection, the build-up, flirting, seduction, falling in love. Show me, Kixala breathed. Reed's heart stuttered. What? She leaned forward, a lock of seafoam hair falling across her face. This flirting. I wish to understand. Seduce me, Reed Holden. Heat flooded Reed's veins. He reached out, slowly tucking her hair behind a delicately pointed ear. Flirting is about teasing, building anticipation. His knuckles brushed her jaw as he withdrew his hand. It's a dance, like your moon's ritual, a promise of what could be if both partners are willing. Kixala's eyes smoldered, her lips parted. And are you? Willing? Reed swallowed hard. He'd be lying if he said he wasn't attracted to his alien landlady. She was beautiful, vivacious, and oozed sensuality from every pore. But he'd sworn an oath of celibacy before leaving Earth, determined not to complicate his mission with romantic entanglements. He started, but was interrupted by a sudden boom that shook the building. Alarms blared, and an automated voice announced, Warning! Hull breach detected. Kixala leapt to her feet. The moment shattered. Raiders! She hissed. Quickly, Reed, we must get to the safe room. She grabbed his hand and yanked him toward a hidden door in the wall. They tumbled inside just as another explosion rocked the apartment. In the close confines of the panic room, Reed found himself pressed against Kixala, the soft curves of her body conforming to his hard planes. Looks like that conversation will have to wait, he said ruefully. Kixala's eyes glinted in the dim light. But it will be continued. Make no mistake about that, or my intriguing human male. Despite the danger, Reed felt a thrill of anticipation zip through him. Kixala was a mystery he found himself desperate to unravel. Cultural differences and celibacy vows be damned. As more explosions sounded outside their sanctuary, Reed held Kixala close and wondered just what the hell he'd gotten himself into. In the cramped confines of the panic room, Reed became acutely aware of every place his body touched Kixala's. The silken brush of her hair against his cheek, the press of her lithe form against his chest, the way her quickened breath tickled his neck. Each sensation sent sparks skittering across his skin. Are you all right? He murmured, his lips close to her ear. Kixala tilted her head back to meet his gaze, her amethyst eyes luminous in the dim light. I am unharmed thanks to your quick action. Reed's heart stuttered at the intimacy of their position. He knew he should step back, put some distance between them, but the adrenaline pumping through his veins made him reckless. Kixala's scent, a heady mix of exotic spices and something uniquely her, filled his nostrils and clouded his judgment. I'm glad, he said roughly. I wouldn't want anything to happen to you. Kixala's lips curved into a smile that was both tender and teasing. My hero, she purred, her fingers toying with the collar of his shirt. However shall I repay you? Reed's breath hitched as her nails grazed his skin. Kixala, he warned, his voice low and strained. We can. Can't what? She challenged, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Can't give in to this attraction simmering between us? Can't explore the fascinating differences and similarities of our species? Can't indulge our curiosity and desire? Reed groaned as she pressed herself more fully against him, her every curve molding to his hard planes. I made a vow, he gritted out even as his hands flexed on her hips. No romantic entanglements during my mission. Kixala hummed thoughtfully, her fingers now tracing maddening patterns on his chest. A noble sentiment, but perhaps short-sighted. After all, what better way to truly understand an alien culture than to immerse yourself in it intimately? Reed's resolve crumbled under the onslaught of her words and touch. With a muttered curse, he cupped her face in his hands and brought his mouth down on hers. The kiss was electric, a clash of lips and teeth and tongues that stole Reed's breath and ignited his blood. Kixala made a sound of approval deep in her throat, her fingers tangling in his hair as she angled her head to deepen the connection. Reed lost himself in the drugging slide of her mouth, the lush softness of her lips, the dance of her tongue against his. He'd kissed his fair share of women back on Earth, but nothing compared to the sheer intensity of kissing Kixala. It was like tasting lightning, like being consumed by a wildfire. Just as Reed was considering the logistics of hoisting Kixala up against the wall, a chime sounded, signaling the all clear. They broke apart reluctantly, chests heaving and eyes glazed. To be continued, Kixala whispered, nipping at his bottom lip before stepping back and smoothing her hair. Reed took a shuddering breath, trying to regain his equilibrium. He adjusted his pants surreptitiously, grateful for the concealing drape of his shirt. They emerged from the panic room to find the apartment in disarray, furniture overturned, and scorch marks marring the walls. Kixala surveyed the damage with a frown, her brow furrowed. This was no ordinary raid, she murmured. They were targeting something specific. What do you mean? Reed asked, moving to stand beside her. Kixala shook her head. I'm not certain, but I have my suspicions. Let me make some inquiries. She started to move away, but Reed caught her hand, tugging her back to him. Hey, about what happened in there, he began awkwardly. Kixala silenced him with a finger to his lips. Reed, I meant what I said. I want to explore this connection between us, but I understand if you need time to reconcile it with your mission and vows. Reed's heart swelled at her understanding. He pressed a kiss to her finger before gently grasping her wrist and lowering her hand. I want to explore it too, he admitted, but you're right, I need to wrap my head around it, and we should probably focus on figuring out what the hell just happened here. Kixala nodded, a small smile playing about her lips. Always the pragmatist. Very well, I'll start making calls. You should contact your superiors and let them know about the attack. The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity as they dealt with the aftermath of the raid. Reed reported the incident to his xenobiologist colleagues, who expressed concern and promised to send reinforcements. Kixala remained tight-lipped about her own investigations, saying only that she was calling in some favors. By the time night fell, they were both exhausted. Reed collapsed onto the couch with a groan, his head tipping back against the cushions. A moment later, he felt the couch dip as Kixala settled beside him. What a day, he sighed, rolling his head to look at her. Kixala hummed in agreement, her own fatigue evident in the droop of her shoulders. Indeed, but we survived, and that's what matters. Reed reached out to tuck a stray lock of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering on the delicate point. I'm glad you're okay, he said softly. When those explosions hit, all I could think about was getting you to safety. Kixala leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering closed. I felt the same, she confessed. The thought of losing you, just as we're discovering what we could be to each other, it terrified me. Reed's heart clenched at the vulnerability in her voice. He gathered her into his arms, tucking her head beneath his chin. I'm not going anywhere, Oni, she promised. We'll figure this out, together. Kixala relaxed against him, her own arms coming up to wrap around his waist. They sat like that for a long moment, simply holding each other and savoring the feeling of rightness. Eventually, Kixala pulled back just enough to meet Reed's gaze. Stay with me tonight, she whispered. Just to sleep. I don't want to be alone. Reed brushed his knuckles across her cheekbone, marveling at the softness of her skin. I don't want to be alone either, he admitted. Hand in hand, they made their way to Kixala's bedroom. They undressed quietly, slipping beneath the cool sheets in just their underwear. Reed gathered Kixala close, reveling in the press of her bare skin against his. They traded lazy kisses and gentle caresses, more soothing than arousing. When sleep finally claimed them, it was with their limbs tangled together and their hearts beating in sync. Two souls finding shelter in the midst of the storm. Reed awoke to the unfamiliar but not unpleasant sensation of a warm body pressed against his side. He blinked open his eyes, taking a moment to orient himself. Right, he was in Kixala's bed, and the events of the previous day came flooding back. The raid, the passionate kiss in the panic room, the decision to explore their growing attraction. As if sensing his thoughts, Kixala stirred, her eyelids fluttering open to reveal those mesmerizing amethyst irises. "Good morning," she murmured, her voice husky with sleep. Reed's heart stuttered at the intimate sound. "Morning," he replied, his own voice rough. "And how did you sleep?" Kixala stretched languidly, her lithe body brushing against his in a way that made Reed's blood heat. "Better than I have in ages," she admitted. "There's something to be said for the comfort of a warm human body beside me." Reed chuckled, trailing his fingers along the bare skin of her arm. "Glad I could be of service." Kixala hummed in contentment, snuggling closer. They lay like that for a long moment, simply savoring the quiet intimacy of the morning. Eventually, Kixala propped herself up on one elbow, studying Reed's face with a tender expression. "Thank you for staying with me," she said softly. "I know it couldn't have been an easy decision, given your vow." Reed reached up to cup her cheek, his thumb stroking the delicate scales there. "It was easier than you might think," he confessed. "Being with you feels right, like it's where I'm meant to be." Kixala's eyes shimmered with emotion. She leaned down to brush her lips against his, a feather-light caress that still managed to steal Reed's breath. "I feel the same," she whispered against his mouth. The tender moment was interrupted by the chime of the doorbell. Kixala pulled back with a sigh. "That'll be your colleagues," she said. "We should probably make ourselves presentable." Reed groaned but nodded, reluctantly disentangling himself from Kixala's embrace. They dressed quickly, stealing glances and secret smiles as they moved around each other in the bedroom. When they emerged into the living area, it was to find a trio of humans waiting for them. 2 men and a woman, all wearing the distinctive blue uniforms of the Xenobiological Research Institute. "Reed!" the woman exclaimed, stepping forward to clasp his hand. "Thank goodness you're all right. We came as soon as we heard about the raid." Reed returned the handshake with a grin. "It's good to see you, Liz." "I'm fine, thanks to Kixala here." He gestured to Kixala, who inclined her head graciously. "Welcome to my home," she said. "I'm Kixala, Reed's landlady and friend." Liz's eyebrows shot up at the meaningful pause, her gaze darting between Reed and Kixala speculatively. "I see," she said slowly. "Well, it's a pleasure to meet you, Kixala. I'm Dr. Elizabeth Chen, and these are my colleagues, Dr. Rajesh Patel and Dr. Mikhail Volkov." The men nodded in greeting, their eyes alight with curiosity as they took in Kixala's alien features. "Forgive our intrusion," Dr. Patel said, "but when we heard about the attack, we thought it prudent to check on Reed in person." "And not just for his safety," Dr. Volkov added, his Russian accent thick, "but also because we were intrigued by the reports of his developing relationship with a Phloxian native." Reed felt his face heat at the blunt words. He glanced at Kixala, gauging her reaction, but she seemed more amused than offended. "Ah, I see my reputation precedes me," she said wryly. "Yes, Reed and I have become quite close. It's been an enlightening experience for both of us." Dr. Chen's eyes gleamed with scientific interest. "Fascinating," she breathed, "on an interspecies romance, blooming amidst the chaos of a raid. The anthropological implications alone are staggering." Reed cleared his throat, feeling a bit like a specimen under a microscope. "Yes, well, it's all very new," he said. "We're still figuring things out." Dr. Patel waved a hand dismissively. Of course, but you must see the incredible opportunity this presents, Reed. A chance to study Phloxian culture and biology up close and personal. The insights you could gain would be invaluable to the Institute." Reed frowned, not entirely comfortable with the idea of using his relationship with Kixala as a research tool. But before he could voice his objections, Kixala spoke up. "I understand your excitement, doctors," she said smoothly. "And I'm not opposed to sharing my culture with you. But I would ask that you respect the privacy and sanctity of my relationship with Reed. We are not lab rats to be poked and prodded." Dr. Volkov had the grace to look abashed. "Of course, our apologies," he said. "We didn't mean to overstep. We're just thrilled at the prospect of learning more about your fascinating species. Kixala's smile was sharp. And I'm happy to teach you, but on my terms and in my own time. For now, I believe we have more pressing matters to discuss, like the motive behind the raid on my home. The doctors sobered at that, their scientific curiosity giving way to professional concern. Yes, of course, Dr. Chen said. Reed mentioned in his report that you had suspicions about the attack. Care to elaborate? Kixala sighed, sinking onto the couch. Reed immediately sat beside her, offering silent support. I believe the raid was orchestrated by my ex-lover Phalox, she said. He's a high-ranking official in the Phaloxian government with a lot of power and influence. We ended things badly, and he's always been the jealous, possessive type. Reed felt a surge of protectiveness at the weariness in Kixala's voice. He took her hand, lacing their fingers together. You think he found out about us and didn't take it well? He guessed. Kixala nodded. Phalox has never been one to tolerate perceived slights or threats to his ego. The idea of me moving on, especially with a human, would enrage him. I wouldn't put it past him to use his resources to try and eliminate the competition, so to speak. Dr. Patel looked alarmed. Eliminate? You mean he wants Reed dead? Kixala's grip on Reed's hand tightened. It's a possibility we can't ignore. Phalox is ruthless when he feels wronged. He has a long reach. Dr. Volkov cursed in Russian. This is not good. We must take precautions to ensure Reed's safety. Dr. Chen nodded, her expression grim. Agreed. We'll arrange for a security detail and start digging into this Phalox character. See if we can find any proof of his involvement in the raid. Reed felt a swell of gratitude for his colleagues' concern and support, but he also knew that he couldn't just sit back and let others fight his battles. I appreciate the help, he said, but I'm not going to hide away while the Kixala is in danger. We're in this together. Kixala's eyes softened, her hand coming up to cup Reed's cheek. Always, she murmured. But Reed, please don't underestimate Phalox. He's dangerous, and he plays dirty. Reed leaned into her touch, his own hand covering hers. Then we'll just have to be smarter and stronger, he said firmly. I'm not letting him come between us, Kixala. Not when we've only just found each other. The doctors exchanged glances, a mix of concern and admiration on their faces. Well, far be it from us to stand in the way of true love, Dr. Chen said wryly. We'll do everything we can to help you take down this Phalox bastard. Consider the full resources of the Institute at your disposal. Reed and Kixala both blinked at that, surprised but touched by the offer. Thank you, Kixala said sincerely. Your support means more than you know. Dr. Volkov clapped his hands together. Excellent. Then let us begin planning our counterattack. This Phalox fellow won't know what hit him. As the group huddled together, trading ideas and strategies, Reed felt a sense of hope and determination settle in his chest. With Kixala by his side and his friends at his back, he knew they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. Their love might be new and untested, but it was already proving to be a force to be reckoned with, and Reed had a feeling that when all was said and done, it would be the stuff of legend, a tale of two hearts from different worlds, united against all odds. He glanced at Kixala, catching her eye and sharing a small secret smile. Whatever the future held, they would face it together, and that was enough for now. Over the next few days, Reed and Kixala fell into a comfortable routine. They spent their mornings strategizing with the xenobiologist team, poring over data and reports in an effort to uncover proof of Phalox's involvement in the raid. In the afternoons, they explored the city together, with Kixala playing tour guide and cultural interpreter. Reed found himself endlessly fascinated by the alien world around him, but even more so by the alien woman at his side. Kixala had a way of making even the most mundane aspects of Phaloxian life seem exciting and new, her enthusiasm infectious. Of course, their cultural differences also led to the occasional misunderstanding or awkward moment. Like the time Kixala took Reed to a traditional Phaloxian bathhouse, neglecting to mention that clothing was optional. Kixala? Reed yelped, hastily averting his eyes from the sea of naked green bodies. A little warning would have been nice. Kixala tilted her head, puzzled by his reaction. What's wrong? Is nudity taboo in human culture? Reed felt his face heat, and not just from the steam rising from the baths. Not taboo exactly, but it's generally considered a private thing. Not something you do in public. Kixala's eyes sparkled with mischief. Ah, I see. So the sight of naked bodies makes you uncomfortable, does it? Even after our intimate encounter in the shower? Reed sputtered, his blush deepening. That was different. We were alone, and it was an accident. Sort of. Kisala laughed, the sound rich and warm. Oh, my prudish human. You're adorable when you're flustered. She leaned in close, her breath tickling his ear. But just so you know, I rather enjoyed the view. Especially of your, what did you call it? Ah, yes, your mini Shai Hulud. Reed groaned, torn between embarrassment and arousal at the husky note in her voice. You're never going to let me live that down, are you? Chixala grinned, unrepentant. Not a chance, it's far too amusing. And intriguing. Her gaze turned heated, raking over him in a way that made Reed's blood sing. I must admit, I'm quite curious about the mechanics of it all. Perhaps you could give me a private demonstration sometime? Reed's mouth went dry at the blatant invitation in her words. He swallowed hard, his voice coming out rough. I think that could be arranged. For purely educational purposes, of course. Kixala's smile turned wicked. Of course. I'm always eager to learn new things, especially about my favorite subject, human anatomy. The bathhouse incident was just the first of many playful exchanges between them, their banter taking on an increasingly flirtatious edge. Reed found himself looking forward to these moments, to the way Kixala's eyes would dance with humor and heat as she teased him about his strange human ways. But it wasn't all jokes and innuendos. There were also moments of genuine connection, of learning and sharing. Like when Chesala took Reed to a Philoxian temple, explaining the intricate rituals and beliefs of her people. We believe that all life is connected, she said softly, running her fingers over the carved stone altar. That we are all part of a greater whole, bound together by the energy that flows through the universe. Reed watched her, transfixed by the reverence in her voice and the way the candlelight played over her features. That's beautiful, he murmured. It reminds me of some earth religions, like Buddhism or Hinduism. Chixala turned to him, her eyes warm and curious. Tell me more about your beliefs, Reed. I want to understand what shapes your view of the world. So Reed did, sharing stories of his own upbringing and the various faiths he had encountered in his travels. They talked for hours, lost in conversation, finding common ground and marveling at their differences. It was in moments like these that Reed felt himself falling deeper, his heart opening to Chixala in ways he had never expected. He knew it was more than just physical attraction, more than the thrill of the exotic and new. It was a true meeting of minds and souls, a connection that transcended species and culture. Of course, that didn't stop his body from reacting to her in decidedly human ways, especially when she insisted on accidentally walking in on him in the shower, her eyes gleaming with mischief and barely concealed desire. Oops, she would say, her gaze lingering on his naked form. I seem to have forgotten about that pesky human need for privacy again. My apologies. Reed would groan, half in frustration and half in amusement. You're doing this on purpose, aren't you? Trying to drive me crazy with glimpses of what I can't have? Kixala would feign innocence, even as her lips twitched with suppressed laughter. I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm simply trying to understand human customs, like why you insist on covering up such a magnificent specimen of masculinity. Reed would flush, his body responding to her bold appraisal. Kixala, he would warn, his voice low and rough, if you keep this up, I won't be held responsible for my actions. Her smile would turn sultry, her eyes darkening with promise. Is that a threat or a promise? And so their dance would continue, the tension building between them like a coiled spring, ready to snap at any moment. But always, they would pull back, mindful of the greater challenges they faced. Challenges like Phalox, who seemed to loom over them like a dark cloud, his jealousy and possessiveness a constant threat. Kixala grew tense and watchful, jumping at shadows and startling at sudden noises. Reed did his best to comfort and reassure her, holding her close and murmuring soothing words in her ear. We'll stop him, Kixala. I won't let him hurt you or come between us. I promise. Kixala would cling to him, drawing strength from his solid presence. I know. I trust you, Reed. More than I've ever trusted anyone. It was a heady feeling, being the object of such faith and devotion. Reed felt humbled by it, and more determined than ever to prove himself worthy of her love. Because that's what it was, he realized with a sudden clarity that stole his breath. Love. He loved Chiyala with every fiber of his being, and he would do whatever it took to protect her and their budding relationship. Even if it meant facing down a vengeful ex-lover, cultural taboos, and the disapproval of their respective societies. Because in the end, none of that mattered. All that mattered was the way Chiyala made him feel, the way she filled his heart and soul with joy and purpose. And as he held her close, breathing in her unique scent and savoring the feel of her in his arms, Reed knew that he would never let her go. No matter what the universe threw at them, they would face it together. Two hearts, two worlds, one love. It was a bond that could not be broken, a destiny that could not be denied. And it all started with a simple misunderstanding, a case of cultural confusion that had blossomed into something beautiful and true. Reed smiled to himself, marveling at the twists and turns of fate. Who would have thought that a glimpse of his mini Shai Hulud would lead to such an epic romance? But then again, stranger things had happened, especially when a certain green-skinned alien landlady was involved, and Reed wouldn't have it any other way. Reed knew something was off the moment he walked into the apartment. The usually vibrant and bustling space was eerily quiet, the air heavy with an unspoken tension. He found Chiyala sitting on the couch, her face pale and her eyes distant. "Chiyala?" he called softly, concern lacing his voice. "What's wrong? Are you feeling okay?" She looked up at him, her expression a mix of wonder and fear. "Reed, I'm pregnant." The world seemed to tilt on its axis, Reed's heart stuttering in his chest. "What? How? Are you sure?" Chiyala nodded, her hand drifting to her stomach. "I took a test this morning, and then another, just to be certain. They were both positive." Reed sank down beside her, his mind reeling. A baby. They were going to have a baby, a tiny, perfect blend of human and Philoxian DNA, a living symbol of their love. "Wow," he breathed, a slow smile spreading across his face. That's amazing, Chiyala. A little unexpected, sure, but amazing." Chiyala's eyes searched his, a flicker of hope amidst the uncertainty. You're happy about this? You're not upset or scared?" Reed took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "Of course I'm happy. Yeah, it's a lot to take in, and we definitely have some things to figure out. But Chiyala, this is our child, a piece of you and me, growing inside you. How could I be anything but overjoyed?" Tears welled in Chiyala's eyes, spilling down her cheeks. "Oh, Reed, I was so worried. Philoxian pregnancies are so rare, and with a human father, I didn't know how you would react." Reed gathered her into his arms, holding her close. Hey, it's okay. We're in this together, remember? No matter what happens, I'm here for you and our baby, always." Chiyala clung to him, her face buried in his neck. "I love you, Reed, so much. I never thought I could feel this way about anyone, let alone a human. But you've changed everything for me." Reed's heart swelled, his own eyes growing damp. "I love you too, Chiyala. More than I ever thought possible, and I promise I'm going to do everything in my power to protect you and our child, no matter what." They held each other for a long moment, basking in the glow of their love and the new life they had created. But even amidst the joy, a flicker of unease crept into Reed's mind. "Chiyala, what will this mean for us, for our relationship? I can't imagine your people will be thrilled about you carrying a half-human baby." Chiyala sighed, pulling back to meet his gaze. "You're right. Interspecies breeding is, it's not exactly common or accepted in Philoxian society. There will be those who see our child as an abomination, a violation of natural law." Reed's jaw clenched, anger and protectiveness surging through him. "To hell with them! Our baby is a miracle, not an abomination, and anyone who says otherwise can answer to me." Chiyala smiled, cupping his cheek. "My fierce human warrior, always ready to fight for what he loves." Her expression sobered. "But Reed, we have to be smart about this. Phalix, he's going to see this as the ultimate betrayal. A half-breed child, proof that I have moved on and chosen a human over him. It will enrage him beyond reason." Reed's heart chilled at the thought. "You're right. He's already proven he's willing to go to violent lengths to get to you. We can't underestimate him. He took a deep breath, his mind racing. Okay, first things first. We need to get you someplace safe. Somewhere Phalox can't find you. Kixala frowned. But where? He has eyes and ears everywhere, Reed. There's nowhere on Phalox 5 that he can't reach. Reed's lips thinned. Then we'll go off-world, back to Earth, or one of the other human colonies. My people will protect us, Kixala. They'll understand. Kixala looked uncertain. Are you sure, Reed? Leaving my home, my people, it's a big step. And what about your work here? Your mission? Reed took her hands, his gaze fierce and determined. None of that matters, Kixala, not compared to you and our baby. You're my family now, my whole world. And I'll do whatever it takes to keep you safe and happy. Kixala's eyes shimmered with fresh tears, her smile tremulous but full of love. Okay, if you're sure, then let's do it. Let's go to Earth. Reed grinned, joy and excitement bubbling up inside him. Really? You mean it? Kixala laughed, nodding. I do. I want our child to know both sides of their heritage, Reed. To grow up surrounded by love and acceptance, not fear and prejudice. And if that means leaving Phalox 5 behind, then that's what we'll do. Reed whooped, scooping her up and spinning her around. Oh, Kixala, you have no idea how happy you've just made me. I can't wait to show you my world, to introduce you to my family and friends. They're going to love you almost as much as I do. Kixala clung to him, laughing breathlessly. I can't wait either. It's going to be an adventure, Reed. A whole new chapter in our story. Reed set her down gently, mindful of her condition. Speaking of chapters, we should probably let the team know about this new development. They'll need to start making arrangements for our departure. Kixala sobered, nodding. You're right, and we'll need to be discreet. If word of my pregnancy gets out before we're ready, Reed's expression hardened. It won't. We'll keep this quiet until we're safely off-world. And then we'll shout it from the rooftops if we want to. Kixala grinned, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Oh, I plan to. I can't wait to see the look on everyone's faces when they find out that a human managed to tame the wild Phaloxian landlady. Reed smirked, pulling her close. Tamed? Never. I like you, Wild, remember? Kixala purred, nipping at his jaw. How could I forget? After all, it was your wild human ways that got us into this situation in the first place. Reed chuckled, his hands skimming over her curves. Hey, it takes two to tango, sweetheart. And as I recall, you were more than enthusiastic about exploring human mating rituals. Kixala grinned wickedly. What can I say? I'm a curious soul, and you, my darling Reed, are a most intriguing specimen. Reed growled playfully, capturing her lips in a searing kiss. They lost themselves in each other for a long moment, passion and love swirling between them like a heady elixir. When they finally broke apart, breathless and flushed, Reed rested his forehead against hers. We're really doing this, aren't we? Starting a family, a whole new life together? Kixala smiled, her hand drifting to her stomach. We are. And you know what? Despite all the challenges and uncertainties ahead, I've never been happier or more excited about the future. Reed covered her hand with his own, marveling at the tiny miracle growing beneath their joined palms. Me too, Kixala. Me too. Bring on the next adventure, I say. As long as I have you by my side, I'm ready for anything. And he meant it with every fiber of his being. Come hell or high water, vengeful excess or societal disapproval, he would stand by Kixala and their child. They were his world now, his reason for being. And he couldn't wait to see what the universe had in store for them next. The day of the duel dawned bright and clear, the twin suns of Phalox 5 casting a golden glow over the arena. Reed stood at the edge of the battlefield, his heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and nerves. He glanced at Kixala, who stood beside him, her hand resting protectively over her still flat stomach. Are you sure about this, Reed? She asked softly, her eyes filled with concern. Phaloxian duels can be intense. I don't want you getting hurt. Reed smiled, taking her hand and pressing a kiss to her knuckles. I'm sure, Kixala. This is about more than just winning or losing. It's about proving to Phalox and to everyone else that our love is strong enough to overcome any obstacle. Kixala's eyes shimmered with emotion, her smile tremulous but proud. "I know, and I believe in you, Reed. But please, be careful. I can't lose you. Not now." Reed pulled her into a tight embrace, breathing in her scent and savoring the feel of her in his arms. "You won't lose me, Kidala. I promise. I'm fighting for our future, for our family, and I won't let anything stand in the way of that." They clung to each other for a long moment, drawing strength and comfort from their connection. When they finally pulled apart, Reed cupped Kixala's face in his hands, his gaze fierce and determined. "Wait for me," Kimate whispered. "I'll be back before you know it, victorious and ready to start our new life together." Kixala nodded, blinking back tears. "I'll be here, always." With one last kiss, Reed turned and strode onto the battlefield, his head held high and his heart full of love and purpose. Phalak stood at the other end of the arena, his posture rigid and his expression cold. "Human," he spat, his voice dripping with disdain. "I see you have accepted my challenge. Foolish, but brave." Reed met his gaze steadily, unflinching. "I'm here to fight for Kixala's hand and for our love. I won't let you or anyone else stand in the way of our happiness." Phalak sneered, his eyes flashing with malice. "We shall see about that. Prepare yourself, human. The duel begins now." With a roar, Phalak charged forward, his movements a blur of speed and power. Reed braced himself, his mind racing as he tried to remember everything Kixala had taught him about Phalaxian combat. The first test was one of strength, with Phalak hurling boulders and other heavy objects at Reed with incredible force. Reed dodged and weaved, using his smaller size and agility to his advantage. When Phalak paused to catch his breath, Reed saw his chance. Using a technique he had learned from his xenobiologist training, he focused his mind and sent a pulse of psychic energy towards one of the boulders, causing it to shatter into 1,000 pieces. Phalak stared at him in shock, his eyes wide with disbelief. How did you do that?" Reed grinned, tapping his temple. "Human ingenuity, Phalak. We may not have your physical strength, but we have a few tricks up our sleeves." The next test was one of wit, with Phalak presenting Reed with a series of complex riddles and puzzles. Reed's brow furrowed as he worked through each one, his mind straining to find the answers. But as he glanced at Kixala, who watched from the sidelines with a look of fierce pride and love, Reed felt a surge of clarity and inspiration. The answers seemed to flow from his mind like water, each one more clever and insightful than the last. Phalak's face grew more and more frustrated as Reed solved puzzle after puzzle, his confidence wavering. "Impossible," he muttered. "No human could be this intelligent." Reed just smiled, his eyes twinkling with humor. "Never underestimate the power of human determination, Phalak, especially when it comes to matters of the heart." The final test was one of courage, with Phalak challenging Reed to face his deepest fears and darkest demons. Reed closed his eyes, steeling himself for whatever horrors lay ahead. But as he delved into his own mind, Reed found not fear, but strength. Strength born of love, of the unbreakable bond he shared with Kixala and their unborn child. Strength that allowed him to confront his doubts and insecurities, to emerge on the other side stronger and more certain than ever. When he opened his eyes, Reed saw Phalak staring at him with a mix of awe and respect. "You have passed the final test, human," he said quietly. "You have proven yourself worthy of Kixala's hand and of my blessing." Reed blinked, hardly daring to believe his ears. You mean it? You accept our love, our union?" Phalak nodded, his expression solemn. "I do. I see now that your bond is true and unbreakable, forged in the fires of adversity and tempered by the strength of your devotion. I was wrong to try and come between you, to let my own jealousy and pride blind me to the truth." Reed felt a rush of relief and gratitude, his heart swelling with emotion. "Thank you, Phalak. Your blessing means more than you know." Phalak held out his hand, his eyes meeting Reed's with a newfound respect. "Take care of her, human, and of your child. They are precious beyond measure." Reed clasped his hand, his grip firm and sure. "I will. I swear it on my life." With that, the duel was over, and Reed was declared the victor. He turned to see Kixala running towards him, her face alight with joy and love. He caught her in his arms, spinning her around as she laughed and cried at the same time. "You did it, Reed! You won, Reed grinned, setting her down gently and cradling her face in his hands. We did it, Kixala. Together, just like we'll face everything else from now on. Kixala leaned into his touch, her eyes shining with happiness. I love you, Reed, more than anything in this universe or any other. Reed kissed her then, pouring all his love and devotion into the embrace. When they finally broke apart, breathless and giddy, he rested his forehead against hers. Let's go home, Kixala, to Earth, to our new life together. Kixala smiled, her hand finding his and lacing their fingers together. Lead the way, my brave human warrior. I'll follow you anywhere. As they made their way to the waiting ship, Kixala suddenly giggled, her eyes sparkling with mischief. You know, I just realized something. Reed raised an eyebrow, curious. Oh? What's that? Kixala grinned, her free hand coming up to trace the line of his jaw. All this time, I thought you were just another boring, rule-abiding human. But now I see the truth. Reed chuckled, leaning into her touch. And what truth is that, my perceptive landlady? Kixala's smile turned sly, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. You went through all this trouble, the duel, the tests, the grand gestures, just to avoid paying rent, didn't you? Reed threw his head back and laughed, the sound rich and joyful. Nah, my love, I did it for the free shower shows. Kixala blinked, then burst into laughter, swatting his chest playfully. I knew it. You just couldn't resist the allure of my curious questions and wandering eyes, could you? Reed grinned, catching her hand and pressing a kiss to her palm. Guilty as charged. But don't worry, I'll make sure to pay my dues. In other ways, Kixala's eyes darkened with promise, her smile turning wicked. I'll hold you to that, my brave human warrior. After all, I think we've established that you have many hidden talents and depths to explore. Reed's heart swelled with love and anticipation, his gaze locking with hers in a moment of perfect understanding and connection. And I can't wait to spend the rest of our lives exploring them together. My wild Philoxian temptress. Hand in hand, heart to heart, they boarded the ship to Earth, ready to embrace whatever the future held. For they knew that with their love to guide them and their humor to sustain them, there was no challenge they couldn't face, no obstacle they couldn't overcome. And as the stars streaked by outside the ship's windows, Reed and Kixala held each other close, their laughter and love echoing through the cosmos, a testament to the power of the human spirit and the unbreakable bonds of the heart.